The Prime Minister is openly calling for suggestions on how to get his hate speech laws across the line. For more, joining us live is Green Senator David Shoebridge. Senator, thank you very much for joining us. We're waiting to hear more from the Coalition, but we understand that the Greens want to broaden the terms of hate speech. Where are you at the moment?
Well, I mean, obviously we're going through incredibly complex legislation, 144 pages of legislation, 300 pages of explanatory memorandum that we got late on Tuesday. There are aspects of this legislation that when we talk to stakeholders, they strongly support. That's the material in relation to a national gun buyback, allowing for the greater sharing of security information between different between the AFP and state and federal police forces when people are getting gun licences. That part of the gun package, when we talk to our stakeholders, that is, you know, it takes us forward. It increases community safety. That part of the legislation is getting strong support when we talk to stakeholders and the community. The rest of the legislation, though, is creating enormous difficulties, and you know, part of that is where the government decided to start with these negotiations and with a draft bill that only protects one religion, that leaves all other religions without equal protection. And our strong view is that legislation that's dealing with hate and vilification and anti-discrimination can't single out just one religion and simply protect that. That is not how you make good law. And it's also not how you bring the community together. There are very substantial free speech issues with this legislation. You know, there are parts of the movement that has been supporting a free Palestine that feel particularly targeted with this. That language such as calling out Israel's genocide in Gaza may see people go to jail. But equally, people who call out the appalling behaviour of Russia and Russia's war crimes and invasion of Ukraine, they also fear this being weaponised against them. People need to be able in this country to criticise the actions of nation states, the leaders of nation states, and not feel that they're potentially going to go to jail under Labor's proposed hate laws.
As you mentioned before, Senator,
when we talk to people about the prescription powers, the ability to prescribe and ban and make it a criminal offence to be part of an organisation or to have an organisation, you know, when I read the legislation and I realised the government was excluding procedural fairness and natural justice from that, making that decision, you know, we're talking about prescription and banning provisions. It seems extraordinary that the government decided to start from that point. So we are continuing to talk with our stakeholders, talk with legal experts, to talk with our community, our friends and a wide array of people about the legislation. But I've got to tell you, every conversation I have with a stakeholder raises new concerns.
And Senator, I would like to bring you back, if you don't mind, to what you said about the safety and the issues regarding the gun laws as well, because we've been speaking to a huge amount of people who are firearm owners. The Sporting Shooters Association of Australia, the New South Wales area alone, has a record number of signatures in the first 24 hours of their parliamentary petition. They're getting close to 100,000 signatures. When we talk about safety, people in the regions that have guns, and we've spoken to some who have 10 to 20, for example, because they need them to kill off their feral animals to allow the the production to go smoothly. Have you consulted these numerous gun owners, because they say they are some of the most law-abiding citizens in the country?
Well, first of all, you know, I know it's complex legislation, but, you know, you would know, I assume, that the federal legislation doesn't implement the caps on gun numbers. That's not what it does. It puts in place a mechanism for a gun buyback, and the caps are implemented at a state and territory level. But this won't come as a surprise to you. The Greens have been on record in every state and territory and in the federal parliament of supporting legislation that focuses on community safety. We don't buy into the importation into this country of US-style politics about the right to bear arms. And, you know, the idea that people need 20 different guns, are there 20 different types of feral animals that they're dealing with?
Well, Senator, if I can
the justification for 20...
only because I've got
Let me just finish.
Yeah, sure.
No, let me finish.
Okay.
Let me finish. The idea that people have a a need for 20 different types of firearms. So we perfectly understand that. And I've spoken to many people who have rural properties and farmers. I've been speaking on gun control for much of my time in politics, and I perfectly understand that you need different firearms to dealing with euthanizing different types of livestock, different firearms for dealing with different feral animals. You would not use the same firearm to deal with wild introduced rabbits as you would to deal with pigs. We perfectly understand the need in circumstances out in rural Australia for more than one firearm, and a cap of 10 seems a reasonable position to put it. You know, but I point out again that that is not what's been implemented in this federal legislation. Sharing information between police forces about people's security risks before you give them gun licences is just a really sensible community
Well, we have to look at how the gentleman who had the gun got that licence. That's for another time because we're running out of time, and I do appreciate you bringing that up because I do understand there's the different states and the federal, but I was going to bring it towards the gun buyback, which is the national one. And if we look at, for example, what was missing in John Howard's 1996 laws, which the Albanese government had said they're going to go in line with those laws, what's missing there? Because if we look at the $1 billion, for example, that they're suggesting, I believe the AFR yesterday, there was a number coming up for Queensland alone, which was, you know, in, what was it, 106 million. But if you look at that state to state, it just, the numbers perhaps don't add up. Have you looked at those numbers in terms of that $1 billion figure that the government has thrown out with the national buyback laws?
Well, I mean, of course, it's an estimate that the government's putting forward, but I don't think $1 billion from the Commonwealth government in order to produce widespread community safety is wasted money at all. And if it costs $1 billion in order to produce widespread community safety, to take excessive number of firearms out of the community, well, the Commonwealth spends billions of dollars on a bunch of other programs that I don't like. We spend billions and billions of dollars giving it to countries like Nauru to deal with particularly noxious federal policies. $1 billion spent on making the community safer by taking excessive guns out of the community is not a misallocation of federal funding.
And we go back to the safety, Senator. What people in the regions are saying, why this amount of guns? I know what you've said before in terms of the amounts, but they gave a great analogy, like a mechanic needs their tools. They need a huge amount of different tools, or a set of golf clubs if you're playing competitive. I've spoken to people who represent the country's, you know, shooting team. That is an international team that's been going on for over 100 years. There's the ammunition, there's the factory, there's the flow-on effect. Now, these people are very comfortable with hearing more about laws, tightening up if they need to. But again, they say they are some of the most law-abiding citizens. And when you look at how a gun has to be put back into their cabinet, you've got to, you know, take away 7 bits and pieces of it. It's very specific. We know that the police can contact them at any time. And if they do one little thing, whether it's an AVO or obviously that's not little, but you know what I mean. If there's one thing that is they're out of line with, the guns go.
Well, I just want to be clear. If somebody is, if there are deep concerns about family or domestic violence, well, then having a firearm in that household, all the research tells you that that is incredibly dangerous for often the women and other people who are the victims of family violence. So I strongly support having laws that protect victims and potential victims of family and domestic violence from potential firearms, violence from firearms. And I think that's absolutely critical, and all the research tells us that. But I come back again. I've been dealing with the issue of firearms control as a state MP for over a decade, and it continues to be my work in the federal party for the Greens. We perfectly understand that rural landowners, primary producers may have a need for more than one firearm, for multiple weapons. I said before, and I'll say it again, you have a different firearm for dealing with wild introduced rabbits than you do for dealing with pigs. And you have a different firearm to perhaps euthanize cattle than you would to deal with rats on the property. We understand, and that's why the legislation that passed in the New South Wales Parliament had a cap of 10 firearms in rural and regional parts of the state. You know, if you can confect a tiny handful of potential cases, which may perhaps in certain circumstances, if you look at it in the dark corner lit only by a candle, might need more than 10 firearms, I'm sure you can. But we're dealing with laws that are designed to overwhelmingly promote community safety, that get the number as right as we can across a broad range of circumstances. And it seems to me that the arguments that are being made that there are these tiny handful of often quite confected cases that suggest you need more than 10 firearms, they're not, I think, persuasive.
Yep, no, I appreciate what you're saying, Senator. I'm relaying what these farmers are. I'm not a farmer. I don't have firearms myself, but again, numerous people are, as you know, telling us, and we are, you know, bringing it forward because, again, many people in the regions do not feel heard.
I mean, I think we should just also have a bit of a reality check.
Well, what is the issue here, though? Because you look at...
Before these laws passed in New South Wales, there were people in suburban Sydney with 300 firearms on their property. People in Mossman and...
in Mossman they've got 300?
No, there were
not
multiple.
On your website.
Well, I'd urge you to go on to toomanyguns.org,
I did
which is a website my office does.
Yep.
You find multiple firearms owners with 270, 280, 250, 240. I don't know. Are you thinking that's reasonable? I don't think it's reasonable. I don't want my neighbour to have a private arsenal, and I think most Australians don't want their neighbours to have private arsenals.
So, I mean, that's what the government should know who those people are. Is that correct? The government should know who those people are.
We should not have large private arsenals throughout our suburbs and cities, and we may disagree on that. That's okay. I think it's bad for community safety. Most gun experts would say it's bad for community safety. I'm not disagreeing on that,
and I've asked farmers about that one particular one, I believe, is only 306, and they agree. They said that doesn't sound good. The other ones, I've asked them about the 70-odd that has 100 or more. This is not me, this is them. They're saying that that's fair. I'm trying to, you know, bring to you, Senator, what I'm hearing from the regions. And okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think having more than 100 firearms in a country such as Australia, having them scattered throughout the country, large private arsenals, they do not promote community safety. Sensible caps on guns is very sensible. You shouldn't be able to endlessly recycle the same reason to get your first gun, your second gun, your 100th gun.
And the law should be looked at
that debate has largely been resolved in New South Wales.
Somebody was able to get a gun in that instance with what happened in Bondi.
Which is why I am astounded the Coalition is opposing measures that enable the sharing of critical information between different police forces, between different security agencies in real time before people can get a firearm. That's part of that's part of the gun package that's happening in this federal legislation. As I say, when we talk to stakeholders, they think that's good for community safety, being able to share information in real time so these things don't happen.
We've gone way over time, Senator, but great to see you. Thank you very much. We really do appreciate your time, and you know, this is certainly not over, and one to unpack a lot more. Thank you.